Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Tony Sabaj, Office of the CTO at Checkpoint Software, to discuss the new era of cyber threats and how generative AI tools are making cyber attacks easier. Tony, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me, Jill.
You got it. Tell us about your role at Checkpoint Software.
So I've been at Checkpoint for probably a little over 20 years, and I'm currently part of an evangelist group, part of the Office of the CTO. And I also deal with a lot of our technology and implementation partners and developing Checkpoint solutions and their solutions with their customers.
How do you think that the recent MOVEit attacks were able to have a far-reaching impact on so many different types of organization, from government to corporate?
Yeah, so the specific MOVEit attack is very interesting, and it's kind of a classic, what we call supply chain attack. So instead of the attacker or the hacking group going after a specific organization, like a company or a government entity, they're going after a service that many of these organizations are using, finding flaws in these services, and one flaw or two or three flaws in the case of MOVEit can expose, hundreds, which at last count was about 350 different organizations were exploited just by being customers or users of this cloud-based file transfer service. So this is a very traditional, what we call supply chain attack, where instead of attacking the organization, you attack services that many organizations are using, and now you can compromise, hundreds of organizations with a single exploit.
How are cyber criminals able to use a zero-day flaw in the MOVEit file transfer program?
So a lot of these hacking organizations are constantly looking for threats in not only companies' exposure to the internet or the web, but also threats in popular services that many of these organizations are using. So they are constantly trying to find vulnerabilities. And when they find them, they need to exploit them quickly before the organizations or the services find out that they have this vulnerability and do their best to patch and close these vulnerabilities. And the fact of a 0 day, it usually refers to an attack that's not been seen before. So there's no real signature for it, which is the easiest way to prevent something. If you know something's bad, you can write a signature and prevent it. But being able to stay one step ahead of the hackers and look for these 0 day type flaws is much more difficult from a security prevention standpoint.
Why have groups such as CLOP and Lockbit abandoned traditional victim-by-victim tactics and turned to a strategic approach by capitalizing on utilized software in corporate environments, such as using a single software vulnerability?
Because of the window that closes very rapidly when a vulnerability is found, and the organizations patch it, if they're going victim by victim or organization by organization, it's a lot more work to find flaws in 100 organizations, and then their window to exploit that vulnerability is usually fairly short. If they can find a vulnerability in a very popular service, then they can exploit more organizations in that window where that vulnerability is, moved from a 0 day to a known attack, and now can be prevented by most security solutions.
I think I know the answer to this question, but do you think that more ransomware groups will invest efforts in finding vulnerabilities in widely used software or buying vulnerabilities from brokers in the dark web?
Yes, and we're seeing this trend because of the exponential growth of organizations using cloud-based or software as a service. So no longer keeping everything in their own data centers and being 100% responsible for their own security. They're using services that are, not just traditional cloud-based like we see with AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform, but services like MOVEit. We saw a similar attack a couple of years ago in a very popular MSP program that's a cloud-based service. We've seen other file transfer services, which are very attractive targets for hackers because they're getting access to customer data, which at the end of the day is really what they're trying to exploit and hold for ransom. So I definitely see a trend, and we're going to see more of these supply chain type attacks as opposed to going after individual organizations one by one.
So my question then is, if it's happening more because companies are increasingly going to the cloud. Why would companies go to the cloud then? Do the benefits outweigh the cyber risks?
So there's kind of two ways to look at this. One, there's a huge shortage of cybersecurity talent in the market today, and it's very difficult for organizations to be able to fully staff and secure their own environment. So in theory, by using a cloud-based service from a reputable provider, they're able to provide security, and you're allowing some trust in that organization to have their own affairs in order so these types of things don't happen, and they have a higher ability to hire the cybersecurity professionals to secure their environment, as opposed to having to do it one by one for each organization. So there is a level of trust when you're using these cloud-based services that you're taking a risk in making sure that that service provider has the proper security. Now, in this case, MoveIt was certified by multiple government agencies for use. So even as a more corporate entity, since they've been authorized by use by many government organizations, that there's a level of trust that if the government can trust them, they've gone through certification processes and different regulatory and certifications, that then you can now trust them. But nobody can be perfect, and MoveIt and Progress Software responded very, very quickly. And these types of things can happen to really any organization, but they were able to patch them quickly and shorten that window of time to exploit. So there's always a risk when you're using a third-party solution, but the theory is that they can invest more in cybersecurity than individual corporations or entities can do, on their own one by one.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate that. What is the importance of companies implementing a multi-layered security strategy then, and quickly patching any known vulnerabilities that arise?
So specifically in this case, there are multiple steps that the organization can do themselves instead of just blindly trusting their service provider or software provider or cloud provider to do all their security for them. So there's data security solutions, there's encryption, there's data loss prevention solutions that can be plugged in to these cloud-based service solutions that allow the organization to take more control of their own security, even though they're outsourcing or using software as a service. So there's a lot of solutions out there that use APIs or application programming interfaces to insert their own security into a solution that may be sort of outsourced or consumed as a service. So that multi-layer of defense allows them to control some of their own security, even though they have a lot of trust in the service provider, to be able to mitigate the impact of, say, a breach like MoveIt, where the service provider was breached, not the individual organization.
How are generative AI tools making cyber attacks easier?
So there's a number of ways that generative AI is really impacting cybersecurity. One is code can be easily generated from ChatGPT or any of the popular generative AI tools out there, which makes it harder to identify known signatures or patterns in malicious code or hacker techniques or signatures of different hacking groups. It's also really helped with, in this case, this wasn't really a phishing issue, but where we see it a lot used is generating phishing emails. As this group is tied to a Russian hacking group. If they're phishing in the English language or French language or Italian language or Spanish, they're able to use generative AI to be able to develop much more realistic phishing emails or communications to help with the social engineering aspect of phishing. So when you get an email that says, your Apple ID has been compromised and the grammar's wrong and the spelling's wrong, and the verbs are out of place because they're trying to translate from their native tongue into English or whatever language they're trying to spoof in, generative AI really helps make the attacker sound much more authentic, because they're using a natural language processing model like you see in something like ChatGPT. So it's really helped the attackers, but it's also helped the people to prevent it and able to automate, be able to generate some of their own code, to be able to use AI for pattern matching and for people providing security solutions, like a Checkpoint Software. We have over 45 AI engines that go across all of our solutions to help keep in front of the attackers and even prevent the zero-day exploits before they're even known to the rest of the world.
What should victims do to protect their information moving forward? It's so sophisticated. I mean, I cover cybersecurity, and there are many times I look at my phone or I look at my email and I second guess stuff that comes through. It looks like, for example, it's a company generated email, or you're getting texts that sound like, the person that's sending the text knows what you're looking for.
Yeah. So from an individual user, in this case, there's not much an individual user can do, because you're relying on, the Department of Homeland Security or HHS that was breached in this, or many of the universities or organizations. They have your data and you're entrusting them to protect it. And obviously they can't always be 100% right. But as an end user of, just technology, what you need to look for is if you get some of those spam emails or spam texts saying, hey, your Apple ID has been compromised. What I would always do is, I'm always suspicious of those, but I'm a security professional, so I'm paranoid by nature. But if I do get an email like that, instead of clicking on the links that are in that email or text or WhatsApp message, I will go to apple.com and change my password or make sure my account hasn't been breached. I'll never click on the links in those emails themselves. So if I get that message saying, your Amazon password has been reset, or click here to claim your Amazon refund, I won't click on that link. I'll go type in, www.amazon.com, log into my site, because it's those links that are malicious that are sending you to usually nefarious sites or introducing malware into the environment. So that's really one of the big things that, the end user can do, is be suspicious of any of those emails. And if you do think it's somewhat legitimate, go to those sites manually and don't click on the links in the emails or the texts or WhatsApp message or however that was delivered to you.
Tony, why are we seeing such an unprecedented surge in ransomware activities this year? I believe there's over 38% in 2022. There's over 3,500 cyber companies operating in the US. Why do we keep seeing an increase of this activity?
So we've seen a shift in ransomware, where traditionally it's been the hacking groups attack an organization, they get access to their files, they implement some type of encryption, and then they say, pay us and we'll unencrypt your files, we'll send you a decryption key. That's a very arduous process to decrypt enough files to make it worthwhile before you get caught. There's been a lot of protections that to keep that from happening. And what we're seeing a shift in is it's still ransomware, but instead of encrypting files, they're just exfiltrating or stealing the data and then saying, hey, we're going to release all this personally identifiable information of your customers and business partners if you don't pay us. And they can do things like double extortion, triple extortion, where they may be doing the encryption and asking you for a ransom for the encryption. They may be asking for a ransom to say, we're not going to release this data if you don't pay us. And then they may go after the individual users to say, hey, Jill, we hacked your personal data from, the university you attended through this Move It vulnerability. And if you don't pay us individually, we're going to release your information. So we're seeing that sort of 3-tier ransom. And that's really where we're seeing the increases in this double and triple extortion of the ransomware bad actors trying to get money out of not only the organization, but also the individual victims of the ransomware.
All right, Tony, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks.